Kerryn, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, on a day when many ordinarily celebrate love, you thought it a perfect day to launch the Removing the Trigger campaign. Talk to us about the campaign and just the timing of the launch.
So the timing was quite intentional because it is, as you said, a day of love globally, the 14th of February being Valentine's Day. But we know that there are many who are not experiencing love in the way that we think love should be experienced, and rather are living in their homes with their abusers, fearing for their lives at times. So the Removing Trigger campaign is really about ensuring that we increase the safety of victims of gun-related domestic violence across the country. And that really comes down to being able to remove guns under the laws that are already in place.
And of course, many would remember that Rehse Steenkamp lost her life on this particular day. But then to the statement that, among others, the campaign is set to raise awareness on the laws in place to protect victims from gun-related domestic violence. Just talk us through some of those laws.
Yeah, so the first law is the Domestic Violence Act itself. It makes provision that when somebody approaches the court to apply for a domestic violence protection order, they can actually ask the court to have a gun removed. And that gun, or the court can then order for the police to remove that gun. So that's the one. The second is the Firearms Control Act, and that law governs who is licensed to own firearms, but also makes provision for the public to approach police to say, my partner has access to a gun and I need it removed.
How difficult has it been for some to go and report and request that their partner's gun be removed?
So part of it, I think, is people not knowing that this provision actually exists, that they can go and ask for it to be removed. The second is we do find instances where the police or courts do not meet their mandate in ordering for a gun to be removed and the gun to actually be removed. So that's something the campaign hopes to focus on, is to really raise awareness about what your right is, but then also to work together with the justice system and police to say, well, you know, how do we work together to support you to make sure you meet your mandate? And then finally, there is a real fear by people in domestic violence relationships who know that a gun is available, because guns kill quickly and with very little force. And so to actually go and report is a challenge in and of itself.
So in essence, you state that some actually don't know that the law exists, but beyond this, is there never perhaps a situation where they need one to delve deeper and show cause as to why a gun should be removed from the partner? Because some could just decide to not go because they would need to have some sort of evidence, or that isn't the case. You can simply just request, if you know that there is a law that allows you to just request that, can my partner's gun be removed?
You're 100% correct. There is no evidence that is needed. In the case of domestic violence, the law is very clear. The law is clear that if you are experiencing domestic violence and your partner or whoever is inflicting that domestic violence, a family member, has access to a gun, you can ask for the court to have that gun removed. It is then up to the person who has access to that firearm to make a case to the Firearms Control Board as to why they need that firearm back. But for the person complaining, no evidence is required.
All right. Now, the view that the most practical way to reduce gun deaths is by ensuring guns are not easily accessible is most certainly a correct one. But how do we go about doing this when the police minister reveals that over 350 guns have been stolen at police stations in the past 4 years? So meaning the very place where many must surrender their guns is where they're stolen.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and a really important one that we need to ask ourselves is when the guns are in a place being held where we expect them to be securely held, but that security being breached is definitely something we would want to focus on and work quite closely together with our partners, Gun Free South Africa and the police, to explore about how do we make that more secure? How do we identify those that are making those guns accessible? But at the core for us is to make sure that the legal system works the way it should. So if I approach a court and say, please remove my partner's gun, the police would go and remove that gun. We then, of course, need to then deal with the after effects of what happens to those guns. But for us, the main thing is having the law work the way it should. Once that happens and the guns are removed from those domestic violence situations, we can then focus more broadly on what's happening with the storage and the access to those firearms.
And then beyond this, the conversation around ammunition or the accessibility of ammunition is also one that is quite concerning. What are your views around that?
So again, for this campaign, we are focusing on domestic violence related matters specifically, and even ammunition and the access to ammunition. You can ask for ammunition to be removed as well under this law. So I think that's important to note. And the ease of access to ammunition, that's something that we need to really look at how that's being regulated, who's providing ammunition, and how it's being sold and who has access to it. So probably something we need a better picture of to say, well, what does this gun-related violence look like? And also, who's actually accessing ammunition, and how do we reduce that?
All right, Kerryn, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was Kerryn Rehse Mosaic, Advocacy and Policy Specialist.